Mr. Mayor, thank you for taking some time to sit with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming.
It's 1 week since your inauguration. There's a lot happening. Let's hop into it with
Please.
the joint child care announcement that you just had with Governor Kathy Hochul, fixing 3K and expanding child care to 2-year-olds over the next 4 years, about 2,000 seats by the fall you're promising. When will every New Yorker have a seat for their 2-year-old if they want it?
By the end of this term. By the end of my first term as the mayor of New York City, every single 2-year-old will have a seat. And what we are doing right now is fulfilling the dream at the heart of the campaign we just ran, which was about delivering universal child care for New Yorkers. And today, the governor and I stood together as we announced a $1.21 billion commitment. And as you said, it's not just about delivering child care for 2-year-olds, it's also about fixing child care for 3-year-olds, because there have been families with a 3-year-old who've been offered a seat only to find out that while they live in Flatbush, the seat is in Astoria. And what we want to do is actually make it possible for them to take that seat, use that seat, and that's what these fixes are going to make real.
Why expand in this way? And let me explain what I mean.
Please.
I'm a parent of 2 young boys I'm raising in Brooklyn, and generally what we do, a lot of my parent friends try to do, is keep people at the same daycare from, let's say, 6 months all the way up till 3K. So why just begin by expanding only 2-year seats as opposed to expanding babies all the way to 2s all at one time?
So we've been doing a number of investigations and also conversations internally within our city government, and found that the best way to fulfill universal child care is by staggering the implementation and aging it down. And we have 3K in this city, child care for 3-year-olds that we're not only fixing, but to actually bring that also to child care for 2-year-olds. And then to continue to build that out so that children as young as 6 weeks can have child care without parents having to worry about $22,500 a year as an expense.
Also happening today, you have Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in town on the heels of this fatal shooting in Minneapolis with an ICE agent that has a lot of attention right now. But she called you out directly, which is what I want you to respond to. Quote,
Please.
"He is standing with illegal people who've broken our laws before putting New York City first." Your response?
Well, I'm not sure what she's actually referring to in that statement, because what I've been doing is standing up for each and every New Yorker across this city as the mayor of this city. And what I will not do, however, is differentiate New Yorkers on the basis of their documentation. If you live here, I am your mayor. And that is what we have been showing over these last 8 days, is a commitment to making this city more affordable for every single person who calls it home.
Her primary focus here in town was talking about the takedown of dozens of people she says are in the country illegally and affiliated with gangs. And she also encouraged you and the NYPD to work with them on those criminal prosecution efforts. Will your NYPD work with ICE on that level?
My NYPD will follow the law here in New York City. And the law, as we have it with our sanctuary city policies, allows for city government to work with the federal administration when it comes to 170 or so serious crimes if someone has been convicted of them. What it does not allow for, however, is civil enforcement or the assistance of a federal administration's attempt to fulfill its pledge to create the single largest deportation force in American history. And what I've said directly to the president, as well as what I've said to New Yorkers across the city, is that these ICE raids, they are cruel and inhumane. They do nothing to actually further the cause of public safety.
And on the issue of people protesting these ICE raids, especially after what happened in Minneapolis, we've already seen smaller protests, I believe a bigger one's actually planned for this evening. Will the strategic response group within the NYPD still be responding to protests? I know you've had some serious concerns about this, but obviously not a lot of time yet to implement that change.
I continue to share those concerns around the strategic response groups, and I continue to be committed to creating a new police response to the exercising of First Amendment rights. And what it comes back to is that this was a unit that was created initially to respond as part of counterterrorism efforts. That does not need to be conflated with the response to New Yorkers using their First Amendment rights. And so what we need to do is both keep those rights as a sanctity in New York City and keep New Yorkers safe, and I'm confident we'll be able to do that.
But as of right now tonight, there's a big protest. Will the SRG be out there because that's the option right now?
The first response that we'll have from the NYPD will be that of community affairs.
On buses, we actually just sat down with the governor today. As you know, we were just talking about this before we got going. One of the things she said, notably on buses, unlike childcare, is she doesn't seem ready to move on it yet. She said it's not going to be in her State of the State address next week. It's not going to be in her budget. But she's not closing the door. Are you willing to wait a year if she says maybe next year, or are you going to move forward with some version of free buses before then?
I'm always going to advocate for our agenda, and the fact of it is that this is a critical issue because 1 in 5 New Yorkers couldn't afford to ride the bus, and that was before it was $3. So what we need to do is show those New Yorkers that they still have a place in this city, and I'll always keep making the case to our governor and to everyone in this city as to why that's an important thing.
But how do you do something without her support on this particular issue at the intersection of the MTA? In your budget, do you say, here's the money, let's do it now?
Well, I think some of this is a hypothetical that I hope not to arrive to. And I will keep making that case because we're very early in the budget process. And I also think what New Yorkers want to see is the continued fulfillment of the agenda. And today's a great day to be chatting with you because that's what we did with childcare. And now we continue to do it with the other promises of freezing the rent for rent-stabilized tenants and making buses fast and free.
On housing, and I promise there's a more direct housing question coming because I know this has been arguably your first move in office. Right after the inauguration, you went and you passed a number or signed a number of executive orders, but you also appointed Sia Weaver to the Office of Tenant Protections. She compared home ownership as a tool of white supremacy. You said you would keep her on because of the good work that you feel that she is doing. But what do you think of the comment itself, drawing a line between landlords and white supremacists?
Obviously, that's not an opinion that I share. And I made the decision to have her as our executive director of the mayor's office to protect tenants, not because of her comments, but because of her work. She is someone who has won significant victories for tenants, not just in New York City, but across the entirety of the state, formative part of what was an upstate, downstate coalition. And we've seen her already hard at work in this past week. She's someone who has been a core part of our efforts to coordinate rental ripoff hearings across the city, as well as informing tenants of their rights in a city where oftentimes they're not made aware of them.
You've been focused a lot on tenant protection and building new housing. What efforts has your office already made on reaching out to distressed landlords, particularly rent control, or those with rent control units that say they're distressed, that they want to help you in your mission to lower rents and stabilize rents, but they just can't afford their buildings right now?
So this is a key part of the portfolio of our Deputy Mayor for Housing and Planning, Layla Bozarg. And in addition to putting together what is our housing plan over the course of this year, she is also hard at work at developing out how we can both provide relief to tenants and also address whatever issues that landlords may have.
On mental health, an issue we haven't heard too much from you yet, and I get it, it's been a week, so right. You know, how soon can you get things done, right? But you've talked about having essentially a small army of community health professionals at outposts around the city. When will we see a launch of that initiative?
So that is something that is currently the subject of discussions within our city hall and our city government. What I can tell you is we've already begun interviews for positions within the Department of Community Safety, and this continues to be a focus for us because while we celebrate the record drops in a number of serious crime categories here in New York City, we also know that we need to make it such that police officers can focus on policing and not have to respond to 200,000 mental health calls on an annual basis. That's at the heart of the Department of Community Safety. It's a commitment to addressing the mental health crisis as well as the homelessness crisis in the city.
In the interim, and you were talking about this at police headquarters the other day, will police continue to respond to the majority of mental health calls, at least at this point?
I think in the interim, as we set this up, we will continue with the policies that we have while always asking ourselves, what else can we do, even as we are building a more medium and long-term strategy.
You spoke with the president after what happened in Venezuela with Nicolas Maduro brought here to New York City. Why did you choose that to be your first call to him as mayor, as opposed to, let's say, something that's happening with ICE right now, or an infrastructure project that many New Yorkers may feel on a broader scale? Why Venezuela?
Well, I wanted to make clear to the president directly that these were the thoughts that I had, and they were also the thoughts that I was about to share with the world. And this is not just an action taken by a federal administration abroad, it's also an action that then implicates New York City. Because right now, Nicolas Maduro is here in New York City, and my job as the mayor of New York City is to ensure that any federal action has a limited impact, if any, on the day-to-day lives of New Yorkers.
Do you feel he was receptive to some of the concerns you expressed? Was it a productive conversation, or did he hear you and say thanks, goodbye? How did it go?
It was a direct conversation where I shared exactly how I felt, and it was a brief one where we both understood exactly where we stood, and I appreciated that.
On anti-Semitism, you undid a change Mayor Adams made to change the definition of anti-Semitism, and the change you made was to say that certain forms of criticizing Israel can be construed as anti-Semitism. You, and in fact many Jews themselves, don't necessarily agree with that. My question is this, though. Do you plan on rolling out your own executive order on anti-Semitism, some of the things you'd like to see done, and a definition that you think is more acceptable?
You know, I think at the core of this has to be the work that we actually do. And that work is going to be typified by the way in which we actually combat anti-Semitism. In another executive order, we showcased our commitment to retain the mayor's office to combat anti-Semitism. We've also spoken about commitments to increase hate crime prevention programming by 800%, because too often our response to anti-Semitism is after the fact, as opposed to thinking about preemptively what we can do to prevent it. And I think, as you said, the definition that the previous mayor had instituted through an executive order was one that even the individual who wrote that definition in the first place had real concerns about whether it could ever be workable. And we want to make sure that we take on the crisis of anti-Semitism and we don't diminish it by conflating it with legitimate critique of the state of Israel.
About a minute left here, so one more serious question and then a fun one at the end. But writ large, you used a lot of executive orders so far, more in the first week than Mayor Adams did in the first 3 months. Is there any concern that you're expanding executive power in a way that New Yorkers may not like, that they just see you doing it without the state or without the city council? Is that a consideration as you sign these executive orders?
What I've actually seen is that New Yorkers are hungry for a city government that moves at the pace that they do. And we're seeing that for far too long we've treated the tools within government as something that could gather dust as opposed to something that should be used to make life easier and more affordable in the nation's most expensive city. And I'm proud of the fact that in 8 days we've issued more than 11 executive orders because it's part and parcel of an administration that's hitting the ground running.
Let's talk about bagels, my favorite food.
Come on.
You mentioned them during the inauguration. You said only in a city like New York could a Muslim kid like you grow up eating bagels and lox on Sunday. So now as the mayor of New York, what makes for a great bagel?
Okay. I mean, my favorite kind of bagel is a bagel and lox. And I also I'm a sucker of pairing it with some pulp. Tropicana is just how I grew up. I have to tell you that recently I had a bagel and lox from Apollo Bagels, not too far from here. Very good.
Yeah? What about as far as like, are you looking for like crackly outside or a little softer or a denser inside? What as far as the bagel itself?
I'm looking for crackle, I would say.
I am too, and I can't find a good one.
I grew up poppy seed bagel, scallion cream cheese, absolute bagels. I know they've reopened under new management. I'm excited to try it out. But I think to me, you can't really tell the story of New York City without telling the story of our bagels.
So I'll have to give Apollo a try. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.